Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and we're here today to talk a little bit more about the Division beta. Of course, we have one last beta that is live this weekend, and it also includes a brand new mission. This mission ties to the Tech Wing tree, which is going to give us access to a secondary ability in the Tech Wing, which is a cool little turret that you can throw up on cover, throw out in the environment, and it'll automatically engage enemies. But I want to talk about the mission itself. Like, that's cool, we got a little turret, honestly. I'm not even concerned about that. But once I actually had the opportunity to play through the new mission, I was like, man, this is actually, like, really well done. This is actually substantially more well done than the Medical Wing mission that we saw, and I feel there's some stuff I want to talk about regarding this. So, let's do it. Let's talk about that. First and foremost, what's the story behind this mission? Of course, each of the Tech Wing missions that unlock the first part of the Tech Wing tie to a NPC in the game's story. In this case, Paul Rhodes, an ex-PMC who's sort of techie, I guess. He's also rather loved by the JTF. And he's actually gone into a subway morgue site that was established by Sarah to try and get power back on. So you haven't had radio contact with him. Everybody in his crew is essentially, you know, MIA. And you're tasked with heading on in, number one, getting the power back on yourself, and then number two, hopefully finding and securing Paul Rhodes himself so he can join your attempt to restore order and life to New York City. Now, I want to talk about the morgue site itself as an environment because it's easily one of the coolest and equally depressing environments that we've seen in the Division thus far. There's a lot of depth and just diversity to the environment itself, a lot of details, a lot of little areas to explore, and it is filled with dead bodies. Like, it is a seriously sad place to be. There is a ridiculous amount of dead bodies. There are huge just bonfires of dead bodies burning, probably set aflame by the cleaners because, of course, we know that's what the cleaners love to do. That's also why the cleaners are here. So it's, you know, they're not just here to be here. They have a reason to be in this location, and it's nice to see that there's a bit of purpose behind why they exist in this mission. Now, the mission itself is about 25 minutes long. I did this on normal by myself. Now, we already know that the game scales difficulty very well, so I'm not concerned about the fact that this may have seemed like a easy mission to run through. I was playing it alone on normal difficulty, and admittedly, towards the end, when I had to deal with the bosses and a couple of the elite tier enemies, I actually wiped twice. So, the game kind of handed my butt to me on a toast, like a burnt piece of toast, I guess in this case, for not really paying attention to the situation and getting a little bit too comfortable with how easy things were at the start. But the 25 minutes that you spend in the mission itself, they don't feel like 25 minutes because the pacing is so well done in the environmental design itself. There's a lot of open areas. You've got some areas with, a little bit of verticality. There's more tight-knit areas, especially when you're trying to activate the power relays. And I guess that's a good way to segue into the mission design itself and how it provided a little bit more diversity than what we saw in that first Medical Wing mission. So apart from eliminating the cleaners as you move through the environment to make your way to Paul Rhodes, you are, of course, trying to restore the power. So you're activating power relays along the way. Now, at a certain point, the power relays need to have their circuit breaker boxes put back in place. They've been removed for whatever reason. They were in the process of being replaced. The cleaners sabotaged them. We really don't know. All we know is they need to be put back into the power relays themselves so they can be reactivated. Now, this is the first time that we've seen the Division sort of force a handicap on the player. Once you actually pick up these power relay boxes, they are a physical item in the world. Your character doesn't just magically hold them in their backpack like a quest item. You carry them in your left hand, it slows your movement, and you're forced to use your sidearm as your only available weapon. I love when a game provides a sort of handicap to the player, a bit of artificial difficulty boost. It's a great way to provide a little bit of mid-mission challenge without throwing elite tier enemies, throwing more enemies, or increasing the difficulty of the enemies halfway through the mission, because that wouldn't really entirely make sense. Now, you had two opportunities to deal with this handicap throughout the mission. The first one was kind of just of a setup to let the player know what's going on. The second one actually had you dealing with multiple waves of cleaners while trying to push forward to the relay to reinsert this circuit breaker box. Love this kind of stuff. I hope we see more elements, more handicaps to the player like this in future missions in the Division. Now, we also had the opportunity to see our first no respawn zone. This comes towards the end of the mission, right before the boss actually enters, and you're made well known, hey, this is a no respawn zone, much like the darkness zones in Destiny. So if you die, you have to start from the beginning. It doesn't matter if you were 3 inches from killing the boss on his health bar, you're going to have to start all over again. If you were playing with a group of friends and they let you actually bleed out, then that means you're out of the mission until your friends either complete it or wipe themselves. So just something that makes sense. I love the idea of the darkness zones in Destiny because they provide a little bit more of a high stakes feel to the mission itself, and the same thing can be said with what they did with the Division here. Now, the boss fight itself was also a little bit more interesting than what we saw with the Rioter boss fight in the primary mission. Part of that has to do with the fact that you're dealing with the cleaners, and this particular cleaner boss has a sort of uber flamethrower that shoots out like 40 feet, so you really have to keep your distance from this guy. The second part of it was that the boss himself had sort of, very RPG-esque weak spots. In this case, they were external fuel tanks that he was carrying on his back for his flamethrower. You could actually engage these fuel tanks to get, sort of small burst of damage to the boss himself. I love that kind of stuff. Like, it reminds you of shooting the sort of orange, goopy, glowing thing on a monster in an RPG, with your crossbow or with your sword or whatever it may be. Providing boss weak spots like that gives you a reason when playing with a group of friends to have one player sort of aggro while the other guys flank so they can engage all of those different weak spots to take down the enemy a little bit more quickly to do maximum potential damage. So that was really awesome to see. It was a fun little fight. Admittedly, like I said, on normal difficulty, not an insane challenge. It's just a matter of being vigilant, understanding the situation if you want to pull out on top. But I would, very much like to see how this mission is going to run out on the harder difficulties with a group of friends. Hopefully, I will have the opportunity to do that this weekend, and we'll talk a little bit more about it this Monday when we hit up the Division Weekly. Overall, though, guys, just really impressed with this mission, especially when we compare it to what we saw with that Medical Wing mission, which was exceptionally shallow. It didn't provide a lot of detail. There was none of those player handicaps that we saw this time around, and even the boss fight itself with the Riders was sort of blah, which is, I guess, what we can expect from the lower-end missions. But it's good to see that these higher level missions, at this point, this isn't even higher level, we're talking level 7, are providing a little bit more detail, a little bit more challenge, and I hope this is going to be the case with all of the future missions that we get to play with in the Division when it goes live. Now, one of the things that I do like about the fact that playing alone on normal is very doable is that a team as massive is trying to make sure that the game can be played in any form. You can play it alone, you can play it with a group of friends. They have matchmaking for these missions, even in the beta, so there's no reason to say that you can't get a group of people together if the mission does become too difficult, especially on the harder difficulties. But it really does seem like they're trying to cater to a wider variety of play styles. Giving people the option to play alone or to play with a group of friends. I really, really dig that. I think a lot of people are gonna dig that as well, because I know not everyone is looking to constantly play with a group. Some people just want to solo it. They like the idea of being the sort of, last man standing solo survival guy in the Division. So that's cool to see them pushing for that accessibility. So that's it, guys. I really, really liked this mission. It felt, like I said, leaps and bounds ahead of what we saw in that first Medical Wing mission. More of this, Massive, please. More of this. If you guys had a chance to play the mission this weekend, or I guess you could say this week, as the beta just went live, feel free to let me know your thoughts and opinions on it. I'd love to hear what you think about it, how you felt about the player handicap that they did, the boss fight itself. Just share all of your thoughts and more down in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one.